favorite one. It says, "Don't let me walk on the side of the hard and unkind appearance, no matter how real it seems to my heart and my mind." So that's the part I really love about that one. Okay, so I think it's my time now. So I'm going to click for Mary to put the slides. Okay. Well, I'll begin. Then we'll just click on to where I am. My name's Cathy Jensen. I was here back in November on my son's birthday for a class that was called "Why It Is Important to Find Our Loved Ones Living in Spirit." And tell me if I'm like popping on this thing. Okay? Okay. Today's kind of a chapter 2, and it's called "An Understanding That Bringeth Peace." And as you'll see here in a second, it's from a quote by Helen Keller. And I had seen, she says, I don't want an understanding. I don't want a peace that passeth all understanding. I want an understanding that bringeth peace. And I had seen that quote years and years ago. I didn't have any idea of how important it would be to me now. So, Mary?
Just click on it and see if it works.
So,
Just click on it. Just click on it.
well, I'll take this opportunity to have a little walk. Okay, yeah. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's the goal for today. An understanding that bringeth peace. Okay, so I chose that song, "The Rose." There are some glitches in it, but the singer's name is Nana Muscuri, and it's a beautiful rendition of that song. She's a great singer. And I chose it because the rose is so symbolic in many, many traditions. We have the rosary, we have Our Lady of the Roses, this and that. And in alchemy in particular, the rose is a symbol of understanding and wisdom. And there's the idea of central text in alchemy called the Rosarium. It's called the work. And of course, Rosarium literally is a rose garden. And I thought I would use that idea kind of as a metaphor, the idea of the work it takes to get to an understanding that bringeth peace, and use the idea of creating a rose garden. So, and our gardening companions, as always with my talks, are the dead. So, here we go. Charles Fillmore has written a lot about the importance of understanding. He says there's basically 2 ways to get it. One is that you listen to the spiritual wisdom inside, and the other is that you just go blindly ahead and you learn through hard experience, which is what I think that I probably have done. So we're going to start with my dad's brother, Uncle Jim. In 1980, June 15th, 1980, I was 25. My Uncle Jim was in the hospital in Iowa City where I lived, was going to the University of Iowa. He had had polio as a child and had some physical complications. Well, they were doing a simple little adjustment of sodium and potassium, no big deal. But my grandma called me from Ames and she said, "Could you please go visit Jim because something's going on, I can feel it." So I went thinking it'd be a 10-15 minute visit because my Uncle Jim was very quiet. As a kid, I bet I never talked to him an hour, ever by myself. So I thought, okay, sure, I will. So imagine my surprise. I get into his room and he said, he was ecstatic to see me. "Come on in, close the door." And he said, "Cathy, I had an experience last night. It's so important, and I have to have this promise from you that you'll tell Grandma. You've got to tell Grandma." And I said, "Okay, I will." And he says to me, "I had a visit from Jesus. I'm going to die today." And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's gone nutty. And from 25, I said, oh, okay. But as he was kind of chatty, I took the opportunity. I stayed for 3 hours. We talked about my dad, my mom, my siblings when we were little, my grandparents. When I was getting ready to leave, he tells me again, he said, "Cathy, do you promise me? Grandma's the one that has to hear it. She'll be in the most pain. I had a visit from Jesus. I'm going to die. I am really excited. I don't want her to cry. She's been a wonderful, wonderful mother. And I said to him, I promise on Aaron's life, I will tell Grandma. Of course, I thought, there'll be no need to tell Grandma, but I left, I found the nurse, I said, my uncle said he's gonna die tonight. And she said, no, he's depressed. There's nothing wrong with your uncle, we're making a few little adjustments, he'll go home in a couple of days, don't you worry about it. Well, 10:30 that night, the phone rings, it's the nurse, and she said, I cannot believe I'm saying this, your uncle is dying. And if you want to see him, you had better come now. And so I went, very afraid, very afraid. I didn't want to go, actually I called my dad, hysterical. I said, well, I don't know nothing about death. But I went, I got there at 11:45, almost midnight. As I was heading towards his room, the nurse came up and grabbed me and she said, your uncle has gone. And then I really cried. I thought I had failed, I didn't make it there. And she says to me, you've done perfectly. Your uncle knows you're here. Your family, and he is so happy and comforted that you are here. And then I'm thinking, what is with this hospital? I thought you said he died. So that was my first opportunity. I kept my promise to my grandma. Erin and I went and stayed a couple of weeks. She asked me to repeat that story 100 times, and I did. And she would always say, I know he's okay. I know he's okay, but I just miss him so much. That was an opportunity to start the garden, the little garden with my first companion, but I kind of forgot. Then, 22 years later, Alejo and I are living in Venezuela. His father's living with us. And on this day, January 22nd, 2002, we were taking Aniceto to a clinic just to do some routine blood tests. He was sitting in his rocker, I was tying his shoe, and he breathed this huge breath out. And I knew he was dying. And I said to Alejo, let's put your dad in bed. He's dying and we can just try to help him. But then we panicked, as the fearful always do. We put him in the car and took him into town, and of course, he was dying. And Alejo had a very, very difficult time. He felt he hadn't told his dad that he loved him enough. He hadn't taken enough care. And so he had this song by Elvis Presley to represent what he wanted to say to his dad. And he started getting all kinds of messages. We didn't quite know what to do with them. We didn't have a place prepared, but I documented everything. And on this day, this is May 28th, 2002, we were in Peninsula, Spain. Alejo was working on this project. And all of a sudden, we started getting all these 22s everywhere. Like, our hotel room was 122. We had coffee. This car pulled in for maybe 2 seconds, and the license plate was 22, 22. Then another car pulled in that was da-da-da, 22. Our lunch was 22, 22. Everything was 22 everywhere. And remember, Aniceto died on January 22nd. Alejo started saying, do you think that these are connected to my dad? Could the 22s be connected to my dad? We paid attention. We got into the car. We're driving home, and he says, you know, I don't think it is anything to do with my dad. I just think that if you start paying attention to any number, you start seeing it you start seeing it. And at that second, the second he said that, this big truck goes by and it says, for moving, call 222-2222. And in that second, and we didn't touch it, we had the cassette with us always. Of course, it was in the cassette player in the car. We did not touch that thing. And all of a sudden, we heard this noise, and it started to play that song. You just never took the time. So, big experiences. Alejo started to, let's just say, cultivate the garden. He started reading a lot about lucid dreaming. So, lucid dreaming is where you participate in your dream. And in particular, he used the work of Carl Jung, and he followed the instructions. He had many lucid dreams with his father. Well, this one in particular, his dad was sitting in a chair, and Alejo was on his way, and he was going to scold him for something. And then in the dream, he was like, you idiot, you're going to lose your opportunity. So instead, he went over and he hugged his dad and kind of petted him and told him how much he loved him, that he was sorry he hadn't taken the time to show him more often. And his dad was wearing this kind of a particular sweater. It was a pearly gray hand-knit sweater, and it had black decorations around the sleeves here. It was a turtleneck, and it had an emblem here on his chest. Then as Alejo was telling his mom his dream, and he says, and then he was wearing kind of this pearly hand-knit sweater. And she says, did it have kind of decoration around the sleeves? Did it have a turtleneck? Did it have an emblem here on the side? He said, yes. And she said, I made that for him for his 30th birthday. So we kind of knew that something was going on. We knew there was something after this life. But then we got very busy. Then, 7 years later, my dad is very sick. And he actually said he was going into hospice for arrest. And I was naive enough to believe him that he would go to hospice for arrest. But I wrote him a letter, and I said, Dad, Alejo's dad communicated with us after his death using numbers. So even if it sounds crazy, please just choose a number. And he chose the number 2582 immediately. I told him I'll be home at Thanksgiving. We can talk about it some more. But of course, he wasn't there at Thanksgiving, not physically. So we were in Trinidad taking a sailboat from Trinidad to Venezuela, and I decided not to go to Iowa for the service. Instead, I used the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I did all of these ritualistic talks with my dad 3 times a day for 49 days, lit the candles, said, Lord, Richard, this and that. And in that book it says, about 17 days after you drop your body, you can start to send messages, in general. So this is on November 19th, and I get up and get ready for my morning walk, which I used to do religiously. And the Alejo says to me, he goes, ooh, I got bad news for you. I'm going to go on your walk today, which is weird because he's never gone on the walk with me, not before, not after, that one day. So I also had a song for my dad. My song for my dad was Memories Are Made of This by Dean Martin. So I go with Alejo, I have my earphones on, walking on the sidewalk. He goes somewhere, I don't know where. And then the song comes on, Memories Are Made of This, and I stop to pay attention. There's a little tap on my shoulder, and Alejo says, which daughter are you for your dad? And I go, baby girl number 2. And he's like, okay, follow me. So I follow Alejo. He takes us through this gunky place, ruined my shoes, lifted up a rusted barbed wire fence. We had to crawl under it, down in this dilapidated little old boat dock to find this boat. It's got my dad's number and baby girl number 2. Now, the idea is not like my dad poofed that boat there. It's not magic. But the thing is, who or what gave him that idea? Why did he decide to go on the walk that day? Why did he decide to go down there? Why, he lifted up a rusty old barbed wire fence. Why in the world would he have asked me what daughter I am for my dad? I have one older sister, Christy, that we've vacationed with her for years. We lived in her house, she lived in ours. He knows I'm my dad's second daughter. And then, why did I go baby girl number 2? Huh? So I started thinking, oh my gosh, this is something big. And I have always been a reader, and I started reading, not about afterlife science per se, but kind about philosophical theology. So one of the books I read was William James's book, Varieties of Religious Experience. And I remember saying clearly, yeah, this is the best book I have ever read. I really think there might be something after this life. Now, we'd already had tons of experiences with his dad and with my dad, and there I am. There might really be something after all. And then, got distracted, but not for long, because 9 months later, my only child, as those of you know who were here last week, standing in line to buy aspirin, he just dropped dead of sudden cardiac arrest, and poof, he was gone. He was gone, and my world went with him. So, this was July 2nd, 2010. On July 8th, I shared last time I was here, I had, in the midst of pain beyond words, there are no words, in the midst of that horrible pain, at 2:30 in the morning on July 8th, I was filled with an incredible peace. And it was that peace that passeth all understanding. It was joyful. I knew Aaron was okay. I knew it. No, But I am like Helen Keller. I didn't want just this peace that I couldn't understand. I wanted to understand what that peace was. Another thing that happened very close to Aaron having dropped his body was at his funeral service in Des Moines on July 24th. I don't remember anything about that service, really, nothing. Except this very short lady with flashing green eyes came up to me, wherever I was by myself, and she says to me, she said, "He'll always be with you, you know." And I said, What did you say? And she said, "Well, he'll always be with you." And I said, "Well, do you really believe that?" And she goes, "No, I know it." And she handed me a box of books all about afterlife science. Now who does that? Who does that at a funeral? It was a complete stranger. I went back later to find her. No one had a clue who she might have been. Okay, so in this box of books, it's mentioned a book by this man, Sir Oliver Lodge. Now, Sir Oliver Lodge had won all kinds of world-renowned medals and been knighted for his scientific discoveries. He worked with radio waves before Marconi, and an incredibly well-known and well-respected scientist who was enough of a scientist that he and others like him were investigating all these events under the umbrella of spiritualism. There was table tipping and medium people appearing, all kinds of things. He's one of the ones that studied these occurrences that were happening for 30 years. Then in 1914, so this description went that I was reading, his son Raymond died in World War I, and he communicated with Raymond. So I felt like I needed that book. I had to have that book. And this is still 2010, right around Aaron's birthday, November 3rd. So my sister ordered it for me. Now, I've ordered hundreds of books, hundreds. This is the only book that has ever come with a little note. And the note says, "Thanks, Christy, enjoy. Signed, Aaron." Now, I don't know if you can tell, but the signatures are the same. I mean, it's like little bitty scribbled AAN on there. The signatures are the same. Later on, I thought I was making it up, so I sent a message to the guy, and I said, "Are you the one who sold that book?" And he said, "Yeah, what happened? Don't you like it?" And he wrote his name on the email. Aaron so-and-so from Indiana. Yeah? I mean, it is the same exact signature. And so, in this book, the thing that struck me way back in 2010, Raymond really tells his father forcefully, "Dad, if only you could see all of the boys over here broken-hearted, because they try to communicate, they try to reach their families, and nobody's listening, they can't get through." And I knew that this was really important for the mission. And so I had many experiences. There's not time, but still I had such a difficulty. You might think, well, with all this stuff that happened, it must have been kind of easy for Cathy. It wasn't. It was like that making of a garden. It is an incredible amount of work. You can have a whole bunch of separated plants, but if you don't do the work, which in my mission is to study and to research and to share and to find out about these things, you can't really understand and you can't really have peace. Now, what was my problem? Why was it that every time I had an experience, I'd say, "Oh my God, I'll never doubt again," and I always did? Well, it's because I believed in material realism. And I didn't even know what material realism is. Yeah? So what it is, it's just a theory, just a model that's supposed to describe the nature of things. We've had many other models. We've had the Earth in the center of the solar system. That was inadequate, so that was modeled up to the sun as the center of the solar system. And you know, when Galileo was giving evidence about why he supported the new model of the sun being the center of the solar system, he wrote a letter to his friend Kepler, and he said, "You know, these jackasses will not even look through the telescope. They refuse to look." Yeah? Well, what happened to me was this model, people call it modern science. This is really the old model. It has been modeled up. I just didn't know it. This model says everything comes from matter. Matter is what matters. And here's the key. The brain generates consciousness. You have this famous guy, Francis Crick, real smart, won a Nobel Prize, saying that everything, joy, sorrow, consciousness, everything, is generated from matter, from the brain. And so I kept thinking, how could Aaron send messages? How could he do it? How could spirit move this and move that? And so I disregarded my own experiences. I called myself a liar. I said that I was, hallucinating with grief. But no, the thing is, it has been modeled up. The current model, post-Newtonian model, says clearly, and people call it quantum physics. I hesitate to say that word because I know nothing about quantum physics. But I do know this. The underlying assumptions on this new model, the current model since 1905, is that consciousness is first. It's not that the brain generates consciousness. It's that consciousness is, and the brain processes it. Now, why is this a big deal? Because it means everything. Those people like me who thought faith meant to believe with no evidence and against common sense, is this all being absorbed by material realism, the old model, that matter is what comes first? And the good news is, with this, if you have in mind this new model, experiences happen. They don't contradict anything to do with spirituality. In fact, they reinforce spirituality, what sacred scriptures have been saying since documentation began. And then you grow, as you do in the garden. Whoops, there should be one. Oh, yeah. You grow a faith. Because I thought faith, I used to think faith meant really belief without evidence. No. It's evidence-based. And that's what we'll talk about next week. I hope that if you have any friends, that you, especially people who have had someone die. My mom's always saying, why are you always talking about the dead? Well, because every single mystic in every single tradition, everywhere on the planet, they've all collaborated with the dead. There's not one of them that haven't. But they had an understanding that was not blocked by material realism. That recent, last 300 years or so, has blocked the possibility. We just automatically think it's crazy, so we go on this other side that says, well, spirit and matter are two separate things. We got these bodies from a master potter and stuck the spirit in there. No, we don't have to do that kind of manipulation. It's all like real, and it's all about developing an understanding that brings peace, and then from that, for those who are interested, having a faith through collaboration with the dead. So that's the story for today. Thank you.